anyway.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, my name
Someone
is
will be ready.
Samuel Ksiazkiewicz.
Okay.
And so Ksiazkiewicz is okay.
We are good to start. We are live on YouTube also.
Okay. Nice to be with you, Frederick. It's been quite a while since we've talked live. We message sometimes, but it's nice to connect with you after all this time. It's awesome. And I'm very grateful that you continue doing what you're doing, giving this effort and putting in so much of your energy to this YouTube and to these videos, to have so many very interesting people talking about topics that aren't so commonly discussed in the general media or general society. So thanks a lot, brother. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. And I needed to introduce you. Actually, Samuel has been here in Uganda. I know all that. Samuel is so traveled. Samuel has traveled so much around the world. Even in Kenya, he has been here sometime. And there's a time he was with Dr. Finalov. He was in Dr. Finalov retreat in Montenegro and did the 9-day dry fast. So he's very experienced with these non-conventional means of doing things like healing and all this. And what I like with him is his adventurous spirit. He's very adventurous. So he has so many things that he has done. And the main focus today is going to be dark room experience, because this is very, people and us just hear about it. Most of people, even like me, we just hear about it. I've not done any dark room experience in a way. I've been in a cave, but it was not totally dark. So we have not much information about it. And people want to know, people want to understand exactly what happens, what is going on with the dark room experiences and all that things, and the advantage of these, what are the benefits, what are the precautions that somebody needs to take. So we have some questions that will guide Sam, but he's going to be free to talk the way he feels. Yeah, he wants to talk. So I'll allow you to talk, Sam. You're free to flow. And everybody else inside in the meeting, you want to ask a question, you just unmute yourself and then talk. But you can give Sam some time, let him talk, then we'll ask questions. Yep. Thank you.
Does it look fine if the phone is back there like this?
Yeah. We have it okay.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, the first question I actually have for you, Frederick, is Frederick sent me some questions right before this call and reading them. Frederick, did you write those, or are those like AI written or something?
This is directly from AI. This is not my own question. That was too short.
It's asking me like, how long have you been in a darkroom career, and how can someone enter into career in darkroom? Exactly, is Frederick is having?
Yes. There are some that you will just overlook. You don't pay attention to some of them.
Right.
Exactly.
Got it.
Okay.
I got it. Well, namaste to everyone. Tashi Dele. I'm outside of Kathmandu, on the edge of Kathmandu, Nepal right now, and I'm staying at the guest house of a monastery of a man who some of you may have heard of, named Mingyur Rinpoche. So he's a Tibetan Buddhist, great meditator and great teacher in his late 40s. So I'm outside. Kathmandu is behind us. And yeah, I'll share a little bit about darkroom. It's fitting to talk about darkroom in a monastery, a Tibetan Buddhist monastery, because in my understanding, in the research that I've done over the years, Tibetan Buddhism and Bön Buddhism, which is kind of like it's a type of Tibetan Buddhism, we could say it's similar. They are the only ones that I have found who have a living darkroom practice and an active darkroom practice. It's not common. it's generally for people who have been practicing for years and have done even years in retreat, and there are specific focuses for their darkroom practice. But otherwise, I haven't found any lineages that seem to have a living darkroom practice. So I'll share a little background first about what is darkroom and how did I connect with it, or dark retreat, or whatever term we want to use. I was a helicopter pilot in the United States Marine Corps for about 10 years until the end of 2016. And at that time, I was also, since I was a child even, I was doing entrepreneurial activities, little businesses, investing, doing things on the side. And I grew up and into my early 30s. I'm now 40. I was thinking, this is who I am. This is what I love to do. I'm passionate about business, and I wanted to be a Marine. So that, growing up in the US and those kind of values, as most all of us know, they don't lead to a very happy place, right? It's going to lead to a lot of dissatisfaction, unfulfillment, substances, focused on business or money or accomplishment or some sort of thing like that. So around the time that I left the Marine Corps, I was successful financially. I was successful professionally. And I thought that I was doing what I wanted to do, but I wasn't really happy. Lots of depression, anxiety, physical health issues, especially with my knees, psychological health issues, addictions with alcohol, sexual addiction, other things. And so, thankfully, shortly after getting out, I went to get an MBA in Madrid, Spain. And while over there, I connected with psychedelics for the first time. And so I began doing some intentional exploration and experiments with psychedelics, coming more like a biohacker, thinking this would assist me with that creativity for business, like that, which is also how I began with meditation, thinking, okay, this will help me. I hear these people like Tim Ferriss and Marcus and ever talking about this is good for like Silicon Valley CEOs. So I'll go explore that. It generally connects us with something divine or whatever we want to say in some sort of way. And so I experienced that, and it kind of opened my eyes and my mind that, oh yeah, there are things that actually exist beyond just this physical 3D reality that I'm working so hard to get success in. So I went back to San Diego area where I was living, and I started focusing on business and real estate investing, but I also started prioritizing my own evolution, really for the first time in my life. So I let go of alcohol, brought in other healthy things, began doing more meditation, began exploring psychedelics in intentional ways in retreats and things like that, and began exploring different modalities to help me with what I recognized I had with this depression and addictions and unhealthiness and whatnot. So over the next few years, like it went from all work and basically no evolution and that sort of thing, like this and this, and then it started going like this. And so I wasn't very successful with business, which I always had been before, and it was quite confusing. Really, I didn't have been since we were a little kid for 30 some years. We're going to be doing this. And so, like, yeah, let's do it. But I didn't actually feel it inside of me. And at the same time, I was evolving, noticeably evolving from my own observations and from feedback from family and friends. I was becoming more happy, more peaceful, more accepting, much more open-minded. So it was confusing because this seems to be going up so nicely, but why aren't I getting the business success? So I was trying different things. And I had read the book Stealing Fire, which is very actually. I mean, it's a very Western. Seals or Google or Burning Man or psychedelic, and they're able to do things that they're not normally able to do. And one of the things that they mentioned was training with the Navy SEALs. They would use what are called sensory deprivation for you to lay down in, filled with some amount of saline water, salt water, that's neutrally buoyant, so you can lay there floating. You don't sink. You're just right there. It's all dark and it's pretty soundproof, with the thinking being that your senses can shut off as much as possible. You start floating, and so after a while, your sense of your body disappears. You don't hear very much. You don't see anything, and so it's really just like this ball of thoughts. And I found that idea to be very interesting. I'd never done it before, but when I went back to San Diego after the MBA, sure enough, there were several different float chambers there, as there are in many large cities. And so I was very excited. Let's go do this. But I was also quite frightened because at that time I didn't have a close connection with myself. I had believed a lot of these very toxic, unnatural, unhealthy messages that general society spews out through movies and pop music and pop books and shows and just general society. You know, you need to be afraid of yourself. There are things inside of you that are bad and evil. You might snap. You might go crazy. These sorts of messages that were fed since we're little kids. Oh, they just went off the rails. They went off the deep end. Oh, they're out of control. And we may not consciously think, oh, yeah, that's me. But most definitely, in my opinion, that's a good, my opinion, most definitely. In my opinion, the mind just absorbs so much more than we're aware of, as I'm sure all of y'all know. They say that we absorb like some billions of bits continually of information, but we see, like, understand, are aware of, conscious of tiny, tiny fraction of it. And what I've learned over these years as I was lightly studying neuroscience and a lot of habit change research and things, because I was really interested in changing these addictive habits, is that in my current experience and with others, the mind just gets good at whatever you give it over and over. If I give it anger over and over, the mind gets good at anger. If I give it fear and depression over and over, the mind gets good at that. If I give it mediocrity and not being good at something over and over, the mind gets good at that. But it just takes things and it builds repetition and habits based off of what we continually give it. And so when we're ingesting these sorts of negative messages about disempowerment and fear of ourselves and things like that, we get afraid of ourselves. And so I was feeling quite afraid, which looking back is rather funny, because I'm like, I was afraid to go be 30, 90 minutes in a dark room, because I remember very specifically thinking, like, what's going to happen? Like, what's inside of me? I've done and experienced dark things on the internet when I was a young child. And you know, the mind goes into those sometimes, sort of looking at them, abuse and violence and rape and, you know, these like very harsh, heavy things. But then I had the fear of, oh, maybe that's really who I am. Maybe I really want to hurt someone or something. And I was afraid to find out. So anyway, I went in and none of this happened. You know, I realized over time that I have nothing to fear of myself. Actually, I have a lot to love and feel close friendship and relationship with. But I really enjoyed these dark rooms. I didn't really have a meditation practice that back then. I didn't know how to, I won't even say de-stress, because that's reactive, you know. I didn't know how to take on stress. I didn't know how to not take on stress, not like take these things seriously. And so I had lots of anxiety and unhealthy patterns built up. And being in these float tanks, they're very restful and very peaceful. People often fall asleep initially, or if they they don't have good sleep and good anxiety or good habits, then they often fall asleep, just showing how on edge they are all the time. So that was the first introduction to dark rooms through float tanks. I did a good amount of them that year and the next year. And then I happened to go to India, and I was thinking to just be there for a few months doing some volunteering, because I was still trying to figure out, what am I going to do for business? Why isn't it working? Oh, I know what I'll do. I've heard people say when you go volunteer for an extended amount of time, then it gives you this new insight. So I'll go to India and do some volunteering, and then I'll come back and I'll be this great servant, entrepreneur, successful businessman. So thankfully for me, COVID happened, and I wound up staying in India for 15 months, and it was, massively transformative. And as you see, I generally prefer this part of the world currently for where I am in life and practice and peace and many, many, many reasons. So while I was there in India, I wanted to explore darkroom more, and I had found different commercial type darkrooms around the world, in US, in Guatemala, in Thailand, in Mexico, different places where people have set up a darkroom, which is a small room, or can be any size, but generally it's a small room that generally has a toilet and a bed and some space, ideally with good airflow. That's a key. Just like in dry fasting, fresh air is key. And one stays in that room for as long as they would like, doing whatever sort of practice they would like. And similar to the float tank, except there's no water, the visual sense is obviously turned off. Generally, there's not a lot going on audibly because you're not speaking with other people. And so one can really give focus and attention to whatever practice it is that they have, or just kind of like being with the mind. And like, maybe, people can use it for planning or like strategy or creative ideas or whatnot. So in my research, as I said, Tibetan Buddhism is the only one that I'm familiar with having a living darkroom practice. I have read in a really interesting biography named Opening the Dragon Gate about a Taoist master named Wang Leping. He had some darkroom training. Of course, probably the person that people are most familiar with is Montauk Chia, who is a Taoist master practitioner in Chiang Mai, Thailand area. And he has a large darkroom where he has retreats with multiple people. I've never attended, but I have some friends who have attended. And then apparently in the past, everybody was doing it, the Egyptians and the South Americans and the ancient Christians, and apparently. But I'm not familiar with anything going currently. So most of the darkrooms that are available are these commercial ones, like I just mentioned, that have begun popping up more and more as basically like a meditation chamber or something like that. So I was looking around in India for that, and I didn't find anything. And so instead, I just took the room that I was staying and I covered it with blankets, and I dry fasted for 5 days, and that was the first darkroom. And I liked it a lot, but it was also, challenging. That was actually the first time that I had ever, to my current awareness, that was the first time that I'd ever had any amount of time basically alone, not interacting with people, like we're just always interacting with people in the common society these days that aren't connected with deeper internal practices. And so that was quite interesting. And I gave up the phone as well. And then that was a longer dry fast. I did that again for 7 days. And again, I was really enjoying it. So then I rented a different room, and I really made it fully dark because that one had some little bit of light. And I was really interested in like what's happening with mind body when we're in this darkness. Mantak Chia has a book named Darkness Technology that, besides some rather esoteric books from Tibetan Buddhist practices and things, it's kind of like the only real book that I know of where people are talking about darkness in a way that's generally accessible for the average person. But in that book, he talks a lot about apparent research. I don't know where that research is from, but it sounds very exciting. That if we are in the dark room for X amount of days, then the pineal gland, which is thought to produce serotonin and also melatonin, serotonin during the day, melatonin at night, then if we don't see any light, then it keeps producing melatonin, and then that turns into this other thing called like harmaline or something, or blah, blah, blah. And then that's supposed to turn into 5-MeO-DMT, and then that's supposed to turn into DMT, and then we're supposed to have all of these like incredible experiences. And at this time, psychedelics were playing a large role in my practice. Meditation was still pretty new, and I was still at the stage in psychedelic exploration where I was feeling like, yeah, maybe this external substance can really bring about permanent change in my life, which they may be able to. I mean, they've definitely brought about permanent change in my life. There's no doubt about that. But thinking that they could take one to these further stages, anything is possible, but I don't think that that's very likely for me or for the many dozens of people that I know who utilize psychedelics. So currently they play a much smaller role in my practice, but I still do connect with them sometimes, mostly just to be in meditation and to work as the mind is in this heightened state of trying to go all these different places and just bring it back to the meditation. And so to go into deeper states like that, but I don't currently think that they can take me beyond. But at that time, I was feeling that. I was excited about it. Psychedelics were new and exciting. And so I was really excited about what I read in Mantak Chia's book and what other people on YouTube and things say, like, oh, DMT is dripping from my pineal gland, and such amazing visions I'm seeing all over the place. That may very well be true for other people. It probably is. And definitely, I would say there are practices in the Tibetan Buddhist and also Kriya Yoga practices that are about visualization. And I mean, Tibetan Buddhists have been using darkroom for 1,000 or thousands of years. So they have discovered the ways and created the ways and gotten downloads of the ways to really use it with different practices to experience some, like pretty amazing stuff. I haven't done that personally. But at that time, I was thinking, oh, I've got to have the room totally black and I've got to do it for longer. So I got another room and I darked it out fully. And I was really, wanting those crazy, amazing things to happen. And they did not. But I got a lot of insight about how untrained my mind was, just going so strong. Although, to be honest, and as Mingyur Rinpoche, for example, here was teaching in these last weeks, I was attending some teachings with him and several hundred other people from all around the world. And, really wonderful to be at a place in life now where I'm at the majority of my life is involved with either self-practice or being in places where people from Russia and Ukraine and Israel and US and India and China and Tibet. And I counted 22 different nationalities just of people that I spoke with at these teachings. And all we are doing for weeks at a time is practicing how to be more loving and more compassionate. It's a great place to be in. But during his teachings, he shares some traditional Tibetan teachings about as one begins meditating, they call like a waterfall or something like that, because most of us are not actually familiar with ourself, right? When we begin dry fasting, we get a lot of connection with our body that we never had before. it's like amazing. It's like, oh wow, for the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to not have food digesting in my body. For the first time in 30, 40, 50, however many years, literally the first time. It was mind blowing. Like, and we get to see, oh, this is what my body feels like in this very neutral state. And now when I start putting in this food, which I was so used to, now I can see it feels this way or it feels that way, or the amount of food that I thought is normal, like eating 3 meals a day is just like mind blowing to me now. I can't comprehend eating 3 meals a day. But previously, I felt very hungry if I didn't eat 3 meals a day. The mind felt very hungry, you know? So now I have much more connection with my body. But in those initial times, it can feel a little scary. We don't know what the body's doing. It's the same with the mind. These things work, you know, these are principles that go across all different phenomena, all different parts of life. And so it's the same with the mind. Most of us have never been a day with just the mind, not doing anything except being with the mind. Most of us are with people all the time. And when we're not with people, obviously we're with the phone. And if we're not with the phone, then we're with a book or a show or something like that, but we're not actually with the mind. And so when one goes to a meditation retreat or begins meditating for the first time, maybe in one's life since they were a young child, because of course children are generally much more tapped into this, they're with the mind. And the mind all of a sudden feels like it's going crazy. It's actually doing the thing that it's always doing. It's just that we haven't been shining the spotlight onto it. And so we don't recognize it. We avoid it. We numb out. We do whatever we can do to not be with it because we're afraid, because we've been conditioned, taught to be afraid because it's unknown. And so we feel afraid. And so when one goes into a meditation retreat, it's not uncommon initially for people to quit, or after to say, you know, I had one friend go to her first meditation retreat and she said, thanks a lot for supporting, suggesting. It was very interesting, but meditation is just not for me. My mind's too crazy. It thinks too many thoughts, you know, and it just doesn't work for me. Understandable. But this is the thing that literally every person, except for the very, very few people who just are born in samadhi and deep, you know, spiritual states, basically every other person thinks this initially. You're not alone. It just takes practice, just like anything. Like I said, the mind gets good at whatever it does over and over. And most of us, I mean, ADHD is so common these days, right? Very common. And I'm not saying that it's not a thing, but stepping aside from these labels that society and the Western psychological and medical system tell us are who we are, our identity, then they're permanent. Let's just think, if I am using a phone that is continually sending my information or my focus to all different bits of information all the time, and I'm talking to so many different people and I'm watching different shows and flicking through, and very few of us understand how to do real deep work and give focus and attention to one thing for an extended amount of time, let alone 30 minutes or an hour. Is it abnormal or surprising that the very few times where we then say, okay, now I want to focus, the mind jumps around? It may be quote unquote ADHD, or it may just be that the mind is trained to do that and we've been training it for thousands and thousands of hours. And so when I say, okay, now this time I want you to do this thing that you've never been trained to do, it's not very good at it. And so that is definitely what I was experiencing. I mean, and even continue to experience to a much lesser degree, but definitely do continue to experience in that first retreat. But for whatever reason, I will say karma or something, you know, I connected really strongly with Darkroom and I felt to go further. And so I happened to have put out to some people asking if they know of anything. And a friend connected me with a friend of his who had connected with a dark retreat in India, in South India. And so I contacted them. And then I went down and I had my first real long retreat. So outside of Tibetan Buddhism, the other dark practice that's basically barely living is this ancient Ayurvedic practice. Ayurveda is the medical system that has been in India for, we have documents, they have documents and things 4,500, 5,000 years old. And at that time, it was at the level that is like mind blowing. So it's a very deep, very, very amazing medical system. A lot of it has been lost because the Mughals came and destroyed a lot of that. And then when the British colonized India, they intentionally destroyed lots of universities of all different types, and certainly lots of these. And so a lot of the knowledge has been lost, but there are still some rare, but some really incredible Ayurvedic centers. And so this practice that I went and did down there is named kayakalpa. And it is a very esoteric, even back in the day, it was super esoteric. And now I only know of 3 places in India / the world that have the facility to do this, which is Ayurveda is super deep, right? It's like a special building designed in a certain way, made of certain material. And so it's a square. You walk in the first door, and then you walk around this hallway, you walk in the second door, you walk around this hallway, and you walk into the inner sanctum. So it's like a building inside of a building inside of a building. And they do that so the air blows this and that way, and the light comes in, but not really. And, they have all these different reasons. And then in the inner sanctum, it's dark. And Ayurveda is health. Oh, part of it was about like healing, which is very good at. The Ayurvedic center that I was most recently at for this recent 7-week dark retreat, and I saw them bringing about incredible results with people with Parkinson's disease, psoriasis, paralyzation, herpes, things that blood cancer or bone cancer, one of those things that Western allopathic medicine say are not possible. So part of it is about healing, but another part, especially of the old Ayurveda, is about basically preventative or longevity, like helping the body reset, and similar to dry fasting, be free of these old or damaged cells and revitalize these new ones. So I had no idea what kayakalpa was. I was just looking for a dark retreat. I was interested in Ayurveda because I'm interested in natural things, but I didn't know much about it. So I went down there just like not knowing what to expect. And I start learning about kayakalpa, and I'm like, whoa, this is incredible. So I was thinking to do maybe a couple weeks of darkroom because I still had fears and things. And the doctor said, well, because of the way kayakalpa works, you're in this special environment. First, you do usually a couple weeks at least of panchakarma, which is special Ayurvedic cleansing. So you take certain things, and then that causes different toxins to come into your body. And then some days or a week later, then you take something to either vomit it out or to expel it through the feces. And then you have special medicated oils that have medicated herbs and things, massages, medicated enemas with different oils, or ghee and steam. And there's many different ways. Ayurveda uses, I forget, I counted once, like 7 or something different ways of bringing medicinal properties into the body. Generally, allopathy, we take a pill, right? Sometimes we get an injection if we're unfortunate enough to have a COVID vaccine or something. But generally, we take a pill, or else they do surgery. These are the ways that they help. But Ayurveda, it goes through the skin, it goes through the nose, it goes through the ears, it goes through the anus, it goes also through the mouth, all different sorts of ways. And so you have this cleansing, and you go into the kuti, which is I don't know what language it is. They also use it here in Tibet and also in Nepal, but just a special means of a special hut or a special building. So we go into the kayakalpa kuti. We're now in darkness, and then they bring specific food, and they bring what's called a rasina, which is a special kind of medicine. Some of them are very simple. The one that I was having then is named Manduka rasina, which is like the go-to cola herb, or the, what's the other name for go-to cola? I forget. And that was basically just fresh herb ground up, given in a little glass. And then in these rasinas, they've been laid out thousands of years ago. So they're like, I also had a little bit of ground sesame seed, fresh milk from, of course, A2 cows that are the traditional Ayurvedic cows that are there right there on campus, and then a small amount of fresh ghee, and then rice. And I had that for 93 days. No, the last like 3 days, maybe I began eating normal food, so 90 days. So that's like a very simple rasina. The rasina is just the go-to cola. But then in this recent kayakalpa, I had different rasinas, and some of these have like dozens of ingredients. And some of them I like, okay, you harvest this fruit at this time of year, under this kind of moon, at this time of day. You get 1,000 of these blemishless fruit. You dry them outside in this way. You grind them with this kind of material. And you take that dried ground powder and you put that onto the land as fertilizer. And then you grow this other thing that you're actually going to use. And you do all this stuff very like super complex, amazing, sometimes using like the ash of gold or silver or different, even mercury, because Ayurveda, and especially a similar medicine, Siddha medicine in Tamil Nadu in Southwest India, mercury, and also in China, mercury, when used properly, is incredibly powerful and has been used for thousands and thousands of years for really powerful benefits. So that's what the kayakalpa is for. I was just there to like be in darkroom because I thought it was going to do this really cool stuff, and because I wanted to have meditation practice. And so, yeah, I got a lot of practice. He said, well, the rasina generally is for 90 days, but we can do for 45. And I was like, whoa. I'm thinking like 14 days, maybe, you know, like I did 7 and that was straight, but that was quite challenging. So maybe we can do 14. But then I'm reading these books in the weeks before as I'm preparing with the Panch Karma and things. And I'm just like, wow, this is incredible. What an opportunity to do this thing, which is apparently supposed to have great health benefits and very rejuvenating for the body. And it's something that's super rare and super esoteric. And who knows, you know, there's lots of romance and exciting, mystical, magical things about India, Nepal, Tibet, you know, so like, whoa, who knows what's going to happen? This is from thousands of years ago. And it's for like, you know, sages and swamis and things. So I got more excited and more motivated about it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do the whole thing. Let's do these 93 days. And so that is what I did. And this goes into something that I can talk about at the end of this, or maybe the next call or whatever, if time runs out on this one, but some of the cautions. I feel very blessed. Again, I would say due to karma, whether that's karma of this life and the different things I've experienced, or if previous lives occur in India and Tibet and Nepal, they would say, yeah, you connect strongly with. I was with one very special Swami, Nardanand, right before this recent darkroom in March. And I was telling him, because he also has experience with these things. He's a very special Swamiji. And he was saying, yeah, it's because in your past life, you were some great rishi. So that would be like the perspective of the Eastern. Or in the West, we can just say, I had these experiences from growing up in low income, so not life of comfort. And then the Marine Corps for 10 years. So again, lots of practice with discomfort and with challenge. And then psychedelic journeys, which can be incredibly challenging and very frightening or just different And then I wouldn't say like stoic, like I ever took on stoicism, but for whatever reason, just my personality, I would do things like that, like sleep outdoors with no mattress pad, or just kind of practice being less attached to comfort and external objects. So I had a good amount of experience in being in pretty challenging situations. And honestly, I would say the psychedelics helped a great deal with that. I had also been really cultivating a practice of loving myself and connecting with myself and accepting myself. And that definitely assisted a lot. Back in 2018, I connected with a book named The Artist's Way, which I recommend to many, many people, especially if you're kind of beginning this or at a place with your relationship with yourself that you would like to improve. And that worked a lot on the connection with myself. I went through that a couple times. I was doing different things. Life had become a lot about like cultivating love, even though I wasn't that great with it. I was much improved from what I had been. And also really one of the biggest, most impactful practices that continues to benefit me the most in life, which I tell to many people, and I don't think most anyone like actually hears me or takes it seriously, but that is just being very aware of the words that I use when I speak and when I think, with the belief that everything matters a lot more than we think. And just like I said, when we repeat things, the mind gets good at it, really believing the power of words and thoughts. And so really working to speak in terms that are open, that allow for possibilities, that aren't limited. Very rarely, including just right now, saying never or always or ever. Even now, I don't say I never say never, because who knows? I've experienced so many possibilities come about that I was in previous years had no idea existed. And if I hadn't been open to it, they wouldn't have come out. So along with that, really believing the power of the words that I use about myself and other people, not using words like stupid, not dumb, like failure, should have, could have. Challenges, can explore new possibilities. I acknowledge when I do things that I recognize could be done in a more healthy or positive way. I acknowledge it, but I acknowledge it in the terms that I just used right now, instead of saying I did some bad stuff and I should have done it better. And so that really helped with my relationship with myself. So when I was in this dark room that turned out to be 93 days, definitely challenging times arose. But because I had this foundation of being with challenging situations and not taking them so seriously, of working on this internal stories from external societal conditionings that I have something to fear, that I can go crazy or this sort of thing, and of working with being loving and accepting and gracious to myself, that helped me a lot. And so that was still quite a challenging one. The first few weeks, at different times, I would have them give me the phone to do some errand, because as you can imagine, also going offline for 3 months. Yeah, there's things that in the outside world, I had been training the outside world. I had been cutting my responsibilities, and I'd been, going offline more with friends and family, reducing my business responsibilities, which were very small at that time. So I had been training the outside world, and I've been training myself. But still, banking things come up or this or that or whatever. So different times I would ask them to give me the phone or whatever, but then using some sort of escapist thing to, I'm kind of afraid to go in, like days feel very far away. But it's after different times, I let that go. And so I was in there just myself, just doing these practices. And at this time, I hadn't connected to the teachings of the Buddha, besides a book that I had read about Goenka Vipassana meditation retreats. But mostly what I was doing was like this amalgamation of all the different kind of Western life hacker, biohacker, Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, neurolinguistic programming, habit change, manifestation, blah, 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 that sort of stuff, like putting all that together. And breath work, and I wanted to fast, but you can't fast during kayakalpa. Obviously, they're giving you this medicine. I was just trying to pile as much stuff on as possible, which is very common both in the beginning stages and when we're at a place where we would really like to experience change, right? Because especially coming from the West, we think things are very linear. We have all this logic about what should happen, and we also have a lot of stories about being a failure or being a success, and we feel like time is running out, and we also believe this is the only life, so time is running out, and all that stuff. So our metrics are about like fast success and doing as much as possible and getting very quick results, which is why allopathy is so successful, even though it kills millions of people a year, because it gives some sort of results that, at least for a time, seem to be beneficial, versus changing our diet and changing the way we act and think and all of these different things. So I was really trying to do stuff in there, and I was trying to activate my kundalini and do these Dr. Joe Dispenza, like, let me blast through the chakras. And thank goodness to whatever, the divine, myself, and to Dr. Joe Dispenza, that didn't happen, thankfully, because these things are not games. They are not intended for people to be doing from reading some book written by a guy who has no lineage. I have respect for Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I'm grateful for some things he introduced me to, and I do believe that he assists people in healing. But some of these things are not to be played with. And I know people who've had Kundalini awakenings or these sorts of things. Even people who are experienced, it can be quite challenging. I know people who have not been experienced, and I mean, suicide is not off the table when these sorts of things happen, and then you really can feel like you're going crazy or you're just out of control or things like that. So thankfully that stuff didn't happen, but I was really wanting things to happen. And so I thought, well, let's stack some more stuff on. Let's have some psychedelic journeys in a 3-month darkroom. And of course, the doctor did not know this, because the Ayurvedic doctors take this stuff very seriously. This is kayakalpa, and you only do it this very certain specific way. And of course, we don't bring in anything else, and all this. So I decided to do that, and again, thankfully, I had experience with dozens of very challenging psychedelic journeys before then. Because this is definitely another one of the cautions of don't do this in the initial times. Yeah, sure, maybe when one gains experience with dark retreat and with psychedelic journeys, then they can work together. If you really feel that you are at this place and your peers or teachers, ideally we have teachers, feel that we're at that place, then yeah, sure, like a tool like anything else. But when one doesn't have experience, yeah, again, I am fortunate, due to whatever reasons, that I didn't damage the mind, because I say go crazy when I do this in the quotes. I mean that about like these things just, I won't even say, because anything is possible. And obviously there are many people out there who have had or have very challenging psychological issues. And I don't downplay that at all. I know many of them. But I mean it from this kind of message that we're told. But if we do certain things, like, I mean, just darkroom itself, the doctors that I know who have these retreat centers, and I imagine, I'm pretty sure these commercial darkrooms, they have screenings for people, and maybe they start you off with a few days, or start you off with going in for half a day and then come out, and then go in for 2 days and come out, and then go in for more days and come out, because it is not uncommon for people to have some sort of challenges, and it's better for them not to go in hardcore, like there's no rush. if one goes into a dark retreat and start feeling like, hey, I'm feeling pretty tapped out here. I'm feeling like I'm really struggling. Okay. You know, there's no such thing as perfect. There's no one like keeping score. We're all different and unique. We're all going through this for different benefits from different past challenges and different past conditioning. And cool, like take a break, go out or get something like the Kindle or turn on some light or something, talk to some people, have a phone call set up with someone that you love who's supportive. Take a break. There's no rush, you know? So thankfully, I didn't damage the mind with extended darkroom, with little experience and no real meditation practice, and with stacking psychedelics on. I was utilizing a substance named Iboga, which two different substances. Well, actually, yeah, I don't know, maybe. I was theoretically utilizing substances that are legal in different places. And yeah, some really challenging things happened. Oh, I would wake up for like a week. I was like strong microdosing. And I would wake up into this experience. One, I'm in a dark room, so I can't see anything. And I would wake up into this experience of feeling like no hope exists, even ever has existed. The concept of hope has never even existed. Just super huge, heavy weight, very challenging, very frightening. And at some point, the mind was saying, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. Very challenging. But like I said, thankfully, I had experiences with this. And so I was able to just kind of like tread water. But at some point, I was like, what am I doing? You know, why am I putting myself into this sort of thing? Like, am I just trying to go until really I hurt something? Like, let's let this go and just be with this incredible experience. And so that's what I did. So kind of rewinding a bit and speaking about darkroom just in general. I find it to be very peaceful, very relaxing. We take in so much information from the eyes continually. Science says whatever percentage it is, but they say it's way over 50%. It's a lot of information, and we don't recognize how draining it is until we get into an environment like darkroom where we don't have to be with it and we can just rest, and we feel like it's actually physically restful. So in my experience, and from my friends who practice darkroom, and from these doctors, we all say similar. And I can share some different. I had like a interview with the two doctors at the center, the Ayurvedic doctors at the center that I was in for the 7 week this year. They talk a little bit about their experience, and then I also go much more in detail. After last year, I did another 3-month dark retreat, and I thought I would just share a few videos about it, so people have, because I do not consider myself anywhere near a master. I'm definitely not. You know, I'm very much. I'm more than a beginner, but like nowhere near a master. And I've still only been practicing basically. Now I practice meditation as taught by the Buddha, but I don't have a lineage. I don't have these practices that have come down for thousands of years. I don't have here, and so I'm still very much recreating the wheel. I've received great benefit, but no doubt it's nowhere near what I would receive when I connect with a teacher who will support me in these things. But I thought to just share, like here, a little bit about this because it is becoming more and more in the public domain as we have different famous people doing dark retreat, like the football player last year. Actually, I think he did his dark retreat while I was in last year's 3-month retreat. And so I thought to share a little bit. I thought maybe I'll record 3 or 4 videos, and it turned into 14. So I've talked a lot about this. And I don't think I'll talk much more about it after this one. We shall see. But for me, as I said, it's very restful. And so what we find is generally there's this pattern when one goes into a darker, maybe even longer, depending upon your normal life and workload. The body is just like shut down. One, we don't have anything we have to do. Of course, the mind says, oh, we got to accomplish all this stuff, but there's no responsibilities. There's no physical stimuli coming in. There's no interacting with all the family and friends that we feel all these got to do stuff for and whatnot. There's no phone. And so the mind and the body are just like, let's shut down. So a lot of sleeping, and it feels good. And don't fight it is my suggestion. Listen to the body and do what it does. So, and then after that time, you're figuring out what the dark room is like. And it's not crazy. People are always like, oh, well, how do you go to the bathroom? How do you eat food? I mean, just like normal, like your hand goes to your mouth. It's not, you've done it millions of times. It's not difficult. You urinate if you want to sit down on the toilet, or you stand in front of the toilet 90+% of the time. If you're a male, you're going to go into the toilet. It's not difficult, but you move slowly, and that's another thing that's really beautiful about the dark retreat. It's just inherently slows down the mind, because yeah, you have the general idea, the bed's over here, maybe the table's on the wall over here, the bathroom is over here through this door, but you move a bit slowly, and you're moving with your hands or your feet out or whatever, and so it slows the mind down as well. It's really nice as I progress over time with the darkroom, and as we cultivate like the trust, then you can see that some extrasensory thing improves. I'm sure that certain people or certain practices can really take it to the next level. I haven't been able to do that. I haven't focused on it a lot, but when walking, you can tell like, okay, I'm coming. There's something solid right in front of me. For whatever reason, you can feel this is solid. I'm going to stop, reach out. Oh, yep, there's the wall right there. Like I can feel it. And you just kind of, the mind has a snapshot of where things are. So sometimes in this specific kuti that I mentioned, the 3, at night, I would go into the second one, which is also dark at night, and I would walk all around, and I would be able to walk pretty fast. And you can count, but you can also kind of just feel the mind knows, okay, we're walking, and now it's time to turn. And I could walk without touching the walls. Not all the time, but sometimes. So that's about the height of my extrasensory perceptions, But I'm sure other people can cultivate things more. So there's not many people that I know. I do know more than most people who have experienced dark retreat, but still, I have 2 good friends who are darkroom practitioners. And then I know some other people, but not many. And I haven't yet connected with any Tibetan Buddhist practitioners. Like I said, in these type of lineages, there's multiple gates because they take this thing seriously. The challenges that can come and also the benefits. And so there's cultivation practices that one is doing and having a teacher and this sort of stuff. So I haven't yet connected. There's probably a good possibility that I will here in Nepal, because there's a great amount of Tibetan Buddhist monasteries and great practitioners, and also Bon monasteries, which are not common. And they have a strong darkroom practice still. So we shall see. I can only really speak mostly from my own experiences. So visually, everyone is different with these sort of things. Some of people that I know, they'll experience some sort of psychedelic that's very visual, like LSD or mushrooms, and they have very little visuals. Me, sometimes I experience visuals with those, and like incredible ones, like the movies with the walls melting and everything turning into fractals and things. And often I see very little, maybe some sparkles or something like that. Who knows? in the dark room for me, it isn't what I was expecting after reading those books, and these videos about all this incredible, like, three-dimensional lion was staring me in the face for 3 days in a row. And these things can happen, and I would say even they have happened to me in a way, but it's not what I and most people, very realistic movie, wow, amazing. Like, look at that thing. For me, in my experience with Dark Retreat, mostly there's continuous visuals. Well, for whatever reason, I mean, the mind, is doing its wonky stuff. I have no idea. It would be interesting I'm sure there will be some research someday, but it's usually just kind of like this moving stuff that's like black interspersed with red, or black interspersed with green, or black interspersed with white. And it can be quite bright, actually. It can be quite bright, and it doesn't really change if you have your eyes open or your eyes closed, which I'm sure tells someone much smarter than me something. But yeah, it can be quite bright. And after days and weeks and months in this, it can feel like, it doesn't feel like darkness. And the meditation practice that I do currently, the name is Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation, or TWIM. I've been practicing this for a few years. And TWIM is a very beautiful practice, very simple practice, and it's basically just letting go physically and mentally. So the framework of TWIM, which we use in the beginning, they call the 6 R's. And this is a teaching that's taught by the Buddha, but obviously, it's brought in modern parlance. And so the 6 R's: recognize that the mind is going somewhere, release attachment to that thought, relax the physical body, because what the Buddha teaches and what we can see, and what I was seeing in the first dark room before I even connected with this, I would be laying down in meditation for long periods of time, or just like thinking. I was doing a lot of thinking back then. I really work to not think very much these days. You can see, as the Buddha teaches in this very scientific way, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, in the 84,000 suttas that we have of his teachings, the mind and body are connected like this. And so when the mind goes somewhere, or we think about, basically, for the mind to think, it brings tension into the mind. It focuses, right? Instead of being open and expansive, it's now focused on this thought, this emotion, this memory, this feeling. And so to focus is tension. And so that also brings tension into the body. And so in meditation, when we attempt to bring the mind back to whatever it is that we're using, whether it's the breath, or with TWIM, it's just this like sensation of love in the beginning stages. If we attempt to bring the mind back to that, but we don't relax the body, then there's still some attachment to that thing. And so this third step of the 6 R's is relax the body. And you can see, if you experiment yourself, how this assists the meditation. And at the same time, it's also a great clue, because as we know, if we've ever meditated, we can get lost in thought without even realizing it. We sit down, I'm going to meditate now for 5 minutes or an hour. And the next thing we know, it's like, wait a minute, I've been thinking about this thing and this thing and this thing, and I didn't even realize it for the last 10, 15 minutes even. Well, now we know there's a clue. If I'm aware of some tension in the body, most likely it's because the mind is thinking about something right now. And so I can relax that and let it go, and so it goes deeper. So recognize the mind is going somewhere, release the thought or whatever, mind object, relax the body, re-smile. So smile, keep the mind uplifted, because as many of us know, different meditations can become very dry if we're just doing them like a job. And let me focus on the breath, really get it, and I'm failing. So we uplift it, because as the Buddha says thousands of times, this is peaceful, this is sublime, this is blissful. The bliss of seclusion, of secluding the mind from the different senses and just being present. This is blissful inherently. This is the natural state of mind, is peace and bliss. And so if we're meditating in a hard, strong, rough, intense way, it's going to be pretty difficult to get the benefits that we're looking for, because like creates like. This is an inherent law of nature, the law of karma. Cause brings about effect of the same type. When I plant the seed for a mango, I just can't get avocados. It's just not possible. And so if I'm meditating in a way that is like this very serious, striving, aggressive, not friendly to myself sort of way, or just not uplifted, it's pretty difficult to get to these uplifted states that are the natural state of mind. So therefore, we're going a different way. So re-smile, return to the object that we're using, and then repeat as necessary. So these are the 6 R's. And they take one into these subtler and subtler states of consciousness, very open awareness, but subtler and subtler. So their mind becomes quieter and quieter. And this is experiential. This is not theoretical. The Buddha speaks of these things called the jhanas in the suttas many, 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 many times. And there are different groups believe that jhanas are different things. From the twin perspective, I can't say one is right or whatever. I just speak from my own experience. But from my teachers who are twin teachers' perspective, these jhanas are this very relaxed, open. Maybe it's not the jhana that's talked about it by the Buddha, who knows? But something is definitely happening in consciousness, and one can experience. The mind just becomes quieter. His thoughts that are all right here, going crazy. Oh my gosh. Last year, when I went into the 3-month dark retreat, just right before that, my previous partner, we had separated what I thought amicably a few months prior, but this was the most closest romantic relationship that I'd ever had, the most wonderful, the most divine, the most all of these sorts of things. I had a lot of attachment to it, but I felt to her, but I felt that I needed to continue going deeper in the spiritual path. And I felt that I should go back to India to go deeper. And I felt that I may become a monk, and I didn't want to hurt her by leading her on. So I felt it best to separate. But I thought that we had separated very amicably, that we're going to see if I'll become a monk or if I just continue. And so I thought, there's a very good possibility that I'll reconnect with this woman that I love very much. And then right before this 3-month dark retreat, like right before, I received like the first communication that I had gotten from her in months, saying like, that's a negative. Like, I feel too hurt by what happened, and I feel like I was taken for granted, and this and that, and that we can have no communication whatsoever. Goodbye. And I was like, no, what am I going to do? I got to cancel this retreat. I got to fly home on Christmas and go to her parents' home and tell her I love her. The mind was going crazy. And it was really interesting to observe, because at that point last year, I now do have some experience with meditation and these things. So I am much more able to observe it. And so I was in it, but I was also at times able to observe it and see like, wow, look at this mind go crazy. Like for the last several months, when we thought everything was fine and I was doing all the meditation retreats and, just thought that in the future things would come up, but we weren't talking right now because I thought that was best for the retreat. It was all good. And as soon as I get this message saying, oh, your expectations have changed, you don't get what you think you want in the future, not even now, because I was still planning to do 3 months in retreat. Oh, the mind is going crazy about how this is like, oh, it's such a travesty, like, wow, amazing little habitual patterns. Of course, so much of this is from these garbage movies and shows and, pop songs. Like, find me one romantic movie or show or pop song that is actual good conditioning, that is actually the way that I would like to live ideally for myself and with my partner. Like, can we find one? They're just spewing garbage into our mind about what relationships are. Like, what is it, Jerry Maguire? You complete me. We're taught that we are we're lacking until we get some external person. Like, what is that? That's not real. But it's very easy to believe when everyone around us is doing it, and we've been doing it our whole lives. And so anyway, the mind was freaking out. And thankfully, I had a couple conversations with some friends that I respect. And also, I was really in this place, what we call dukkha, the Buddhist teaching, the language that suttas are in Pali, which is an ancient non-living language that was around the time that he was around, about 2,600 years ago. So the Pali term for dukkha is often translated as suffering or dissatisfaction, or something like this. And in the teachings of the Buddha, this is something that is inherent in existence until one becomes enlightened, basically, by not identifying with things. But otherwise, there is always some degree of dukkha or dissatisfaction or suffering, because we either want something we don't have, or we have something and we don't want it to go away, or it goes away and we're bummed out, or we're experiencing something that we don't want to be experiencing, like pain or partner leaving or something like this. But these are just the habitual consciousness patterns. And so sometimes it's much less, and as we practice meditation, it becomes less, but this is just the thing, the law of nature. And so what I have experienced over these last years, as I have been going deeper into spiritual exploration, is like we become, speaking from my own experience, and then friends and peers are all around the world, as Frederick said, I just wind up all around the world currently, which has been very, very interesting, and not the way that I ever thought that I would live, especially as I stopped working. So I received some money from the Veterans Administration for some different health issues, and a little bit of money from some past real estate investments, which is not enough to live in any way nicely in the incredibly expensive currently United States or most European countries. But in a place like India or Nepal, where I can stay in a room dollars, and for a long term, I can rent a place for like $150, then I'm able to do it. And so I just wind up all around the world. So as I have been doing these different sorts of things, start seeing behind the veil a little bit of what normal society is, and it starts seeming pretty bizarre, right? Like at first we don't recognize it because we're so busy doing all this stuff, and we're numbing out with alcohol or cannabis or whatever substances, sex or overwork, or obviously the phone and social media. And so we're numbing out and we think this is what life is. And we think, of course, the United States or whatever country we're living. Of course, it's difficult. Wait, you're telling me the medical system that is supposedly at the edge, the forefront of medicine, new technology, you're telling me that actually people are more unhealthy in that system than in this system that's very ancient, or in these, you're telling me that per capita, way less people died in Uganda than they did in the United States out of COVID? That can't be possible, It must be because, as my friends have said, it must be because Uganda, they don't have tracking. And I'm like, no, that's not it. This is still 2024. They have hospitals and computers and things just like everywhere else. So it's difficult to see what we call these blind spots. But then as we begin experiencing different things with psychedelics, with meditation, with communities like the one that Frederick has created with this dry fasting group, with living in other countries, when I lived in Madrid for a year, we wouldn't think that Spain is really that much different from the United States. But I had all kinds of insights staying in a place for more than, a classic Western vacation of a week or two. Then you're just on the surface level and you're doing these things, but staying in for weeks or months. And I had all these insights and revelations and things that I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I thought this was always the best way to do it. And this is possible. So you start seeing behind the veil a bit, start seeing like, man, this is rather bizarre. Maybe we feel some anger or some frustration because it's like, what the heck, like, how is it legal that alcohol is advertised on television when young kids are watching this and they think that it's super cool, when now I realize that alcohol is only a poison to the body and the mind and the spirit. And it doesn't make me feel better, but it is very addictive. Like, we start getting a little bit of this bitterness, perhaps, a bit of this frustration, seeing all these challenges that we had in life that theoretically we may not have experienced if society had been more helpful and gracious and intentional and spiritual and love-filled. So we can kind of get into this, like, it's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, where we're not totally blinded, but we haven't yet got to the place where we have real equanimity and real acceptance that it doesn't matter why this is happening. The fact is, this is happening. Most of it's outside of my control. The only thing that I can do is continue practicing to be whatever type of person it is that I'm interested in. And then subsequently that will impact the people in my little bubble and impact me. That's all we can do. And obviously that can be very huge impacts, but like, I can't just say, hey, I'm going to go change global warming by like these violent protests and, bombing the logging companies or, like fighting for justice or something like this. Obviously just perpetuates the same energy that I say that I'm not interested in, which is definitely what I observe from the liberal side, especially during COVID. But also, during this United States election coming, and, they're attacking the conservatives who have, neither one has, like, they've definitely got challenges in both, but the liberals will say, well, like, these people are racist or whatever. And so, like, let's talk about how stupid they are and let's attack them and let's, like, force them to do this stuff. And it's like, guys, even if that is true, which I'm definitely not saying that all conservative people are like that, and I'm not saying all liberal people are like that, but even if that is true, you can't use violence and aggression to bring about love and peace. Like, it's just not how it works. And so, but this is the energy that we see a lot currently in my observation, because we have the internet that can share information and because we have things like psychedelics and stuff, but especially in the West, we don't have actual lineages. We don't have like really deep practitioners who have experienced, if not the end of the path, at least much further along. So most people are going about with some of their own experience and taken from some people like whatever that fella's name is who wrote the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, And I was reading that and it's like, yeah, there's some insights here, but he's coming across with this other energy that leads one in the other direction. So anyway, that's not really related to Darkroom, but sharing where I was last year. It was a long tangent, huh? Please excuse me. That's the way that I communicate these days, is like expanding and expounding. It's not so linear. But I was at that place and I could tell I was at that place, and it doesn't feel good. I can tell, like, part of the time I'm positive and loving, but part of the time I'm talking about allopathic medicine is so messed up and military industrial complex and whatever. And so I felt like, okay, I'm going to go into this dark room either way. So I went into the dark room last year and I'm doing this swim practice. And as I said, after 3 or 4 days of meditating, it's like the thoughts are here. Oh my gosh, I got to stop this retreat. My partner what am I going to do? This is so bad. And then it's like the thoughts go from here, or right around 100% to way over here, around maybe 20%. And then they go way over there, feels like under the ocean, and they're like a tiny percent. And the mind is just very peaceful and tranquil. And then at some point, according to the twin practice and their understanding of the suttas, when one goes into these deeper states of consciousness, at some point, there can be what's called Nirodha Samapatti, or something happens. I'm not saying that what I've experienced is Nirodha Samapatti, but it's this where the mind just shuts off, maybe for a split second, and very experienced deep practitioners are able to enter this for extended amounts of times. But basically, there is nothing. It's not non-duality. There's no awareness. It's nothing. You only realize that it occurred when you come out of it. And so I experienced that, whatever it is, a few times last year in the dark retreat. And you could tell because, as I said, the darkness becomes pretty bright. And then all of a sudden it would be blam, black, and then light again. And the mind was so used to how bright it is, even though it doesn't realize it, because I've been in it for 89 days. So it's just all I see 24/7. I don't even realize it until there's this blam, blackout, and the mind comes back on. And it was like, I literally thought, because I was so conditioned to the light of the mind in dark retreat, that someone had shut the light off in the room that I was in. And then I remembered I'm in a dark room and the lights are off. So whatever that is, I have no idea. That's a very long way. Very long way of describing some of the visual phenomena in the dark room. So for all of you that were really hoping that you experience magical things, it very well happened. I'm not saying that it won't. It just hasn't happened for me. So I can talk about a lot of different stuff, and I've been sharing about a lot of different stuff, but why don't we go to any sort of questions, or Frederick, if you've got anything you'd like to talk about? Or maybe Frederick is, oh yeah, he's here. Okay. And I'll look at the chat.
This is what I'm thinking. We are going to have question and answer session as part 2. That's what I'm thinking. As part 2 of this, our meeting, we do a question and answer. Because we allowed it to flow, nobody asked questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in 3 minutes, we are going to have, you understand what I told you, we have another meeting now. The online retreat is going on with the
When is it?
Now, I've seen somebody from,
perfect timing.
I've seen a reply, somebody who's in on YouTube called William Orokut. Maybe you know him from Uganda. He says it's called William Orokut. Just watching,
hey,
okay.
William, what's up, brother? Namaste,
okay.
Namaste.
Yeah, and then in the chat, there are some people who are saying thank you for your honesty and authenticity. I appreciate it. That is Magain Owens. Then she also said, I have been very interested in kayakalpa since many years, but didn't find the place to explore. So nice to hear you talk about this. Yeah.
I can share more.
Yeah. We will, this is, I'm telling everyone, we are going to arrange with Samuel a best time where we have now rest from people. People ask questions, people give also their, we say interactive. Today we were listening the entire time. So thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Let me just share real quick. So William, who put the comment there in YouTube, he lives in Uganda. We met in Uganda a few years ago. And after last year's dark retreat, I connected with this very special Ayurvedic center that I stayed at this year. And they, like I said, I've seen them bring about all kinds of amazing healings. So shortly after that, William told me that he had been having all of these issues. His body is full of pains and all of this stuff. And he was diagnosed with a brain lesion. And they said that all they could do was surgery on it. So I asked him if he would be interested in connecting with this center. He was. We set up a call And then we helped raise some money for him. He went from Uganda to this center. He was scheduled to have about 2 weeks of treatment. Ultimately, he had a family issue and had to go back after like 8 days. But even just with that 8 days, and then with some fresh made medicines they gave him, he was totally cured of that brain lesion. And he hasn't suffered any issues since, to the best of my knowledge, from us talking a little while ago.
Wow, that's powerful. That's very powerful. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think that's why he's
All right,
following
brother.
up. Yeah. That's powerful. By the way, we can have him. We can have him in the next session. Can also share his testimony. He can share with us here in the next session, the
It's
interactive
possible.
session.
Yeah.
So we are going to have part 2, and there will be that interactive measure. We have to hang it up for now. Thank you so much.